Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Ichigo becomes a temporary captain of 15th Division Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the MultipleCyrosis for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. So, what is your answer? 1st Division Captain Yamamoto's eyes looked directly into Ichigo. The usually rude, loud, grumpy Ichigo had now turned into a smaller, quieter person. You don't have to answer now. Think about it. Ichigo left the captain's meeting hall. What the hell? He muttered softly to himself, not noticing the footsteps of a smaller Shinigami. What are you angry about now? He jumped and crashed into the ceiling above him. This was Soul Society after all, and his physical abilities had increased greatly. I said. I know what you said, geez, Rukia, don't sneak up on me like that. The smaller Shinigami grinned deviously. Well. Ichigo sighed. Well, it seems that Mr. Big Guy up there gestured to the captain's meeting hall and wanted me to consider taking the job of a captain of the 5th Division. Silence. Of course, Ichigo added hastily, it'd only be temporary and only during my school holidays. More silence. Ichigo looked down at his raven-haired friend. Oi, say something. He said, a bit annoyed that she was, well, it looked like she was, blatantly ignoring him. She turned her head. Well, she looked at him, her eyes sinking into his. Ichigo involuntarily shuddered. Those eyes could bore holes in cement. They had stopped walking, and Rukia hadn't stopped looking at him. Oh crap, I better tell her I'm not going to accept before she tells me off about leaving my family and all that responsibility. PFFF, I hate responsibility. He opened his mouth, but before he could say a word about him not accepting it, she said in a different kind of voice, you're going to accept it, right? Ichigo frowned. What was that look in her eyes? Worry, no, hope. This conversation was definitely weird. One of the few ones he had had with her without fighting. He was worrying about the weirdness of her face when something hit him. Hard. Oh, listen to me when I'm talking to you. She scowled at him, her usual facial expression coming back. Speak for yourself. Who was the one not listening to me a while back? Oops. Scrap that conversation with no fighting. He breathed out a little, relieved. She was normal. Or so he thought. Much later, Ichigo, plus a few bruises, and Rukia sat on an abandoned bench near the 5th Division headquarters. So? Ichigo turned to his smaller counterpart, scowling. His head was throbbing a little. So what? Rukia turned to look at him. Are you going to accept? Those eyes. Those damn eyes. Her tone did not explain what she was feeling, but when Ichigo looked in her eyes, he knew. He knew she wanted him to accept. Okay class, pack up. As soon as the words came out of the teacher's mouth, immediate turmoil prevailed. For about 2 seconds. The next 2 seconds were immediate verbal turmoil. Ichigo sighed. He put his books in his bag and proceeded to stand up. Google. A flying, crying, yelling, Kigo Asano. Disgusting, he thought, and proceeded to punch his friend as he flew towards him. He turned around and saw most of his friends looking at him. He sighed inwardly. It was the last day of school for the year. He had to say something. Well, I guess I'll see you guys around. And with that, he turned and left Chad, Inoue, Ishida, Mizuro, and a crying Kigo. He's been so distant lately. Everyone looked up, startled. Chad had actually said something. But, taking in what he had said, they nodded silently. Even more so than before, if that's possible. This time it was Ishida who spoke. The serious mood was broken by Kigo and a smirking Mizuro. Even more so than before, if that's possible. Imitated Kigo in a high falsetto voice. Ishida glared at him through sun-reflecting glasses. As he opened the door, he was met with a terrific 3-phase flying reverse kick. Well, an attempt. He lazily blocked his father's greeting and returned one of his own, leaving his father sobbing and crying in a large indent on the family hall. So, Ichi-nai, what are your plans for this holiday? Karen asked him curiously. They were at the dinner table now, munching on Yuzu's delicious food, although Ichigo would never bring himself to admit it. Yeah, Ichi-nai, what are your plans? Joined in Yuzu. Before he could say anything, the sobbing of his father interrupted him. Old man. Ichigo turned to face his father. His forehead was smooth, but for one rather large vein on the side of his head. His father continued sobbing melodramatically. Yes, what are your plans? Last holidays we didn't even get to spend time together as father and son. Ichigo was about to hit his father, till what he heard hit him. The protruding vein stopped, and he sat for a moment. Yeah, I guess so. He turned and looked at his sisters' faces, full of hope. Ugh. Actually, he was cut off again by his father. I have the solution. Issen stated, with one leg on the table and his fist in the air. We will take a family holiday. He looked down expectantly at his children. And was met with fists and feet and yells of, "Shut up, old man. That must have been Karen, or like hell I'll go on a holiday with you. Definitely Ichigo, and Dad. Get your feet off the table." That must have been Yuzu. Isin thought as he lay battered on the ground. Somehow, the dining table returned to normal. Well, what they thought was normal anyway. "You can't have a normal meal in the Kurosaki household," general quote from the neighborhood. After some general munching, Ichigo finally spoke up, softer than usual. "Actually, I'd like to spend the time with you guys," gesturing to his sisters, "but I have a summer job." Instant pandemonium broke loose. Yells were heard throughout the neighborhood and Isin was behind his son, enthusiastically clapping him on the back. "Good job, my son." Karen was about to congratulate Ichigo as well. Hell, Ichigo never got a job during the holidays. That was until she heard the terrible pun her father had made. Smack. The slightly dazzled Isin lay on the floor with tears streaming down his face. "I was being serious." Yeah, shut up. "Good on you, Ichinai," she paused and thought. "What kind of job?" Ichigo lay in bed, thinking over the events of dinner. He was still in his school uniform, with food stains all over it. The results of dinner were, as usual, harsh. Karen and Yuzu ended up asking so many questions that he felt his ears would burst. His father, on the other hand, was being unusually quiet. He exhaled. It wasn't like him to think like this. He looked over at his watch. 11:20 p.m. The rest of the family had gone to sleep and he had to as well to get to the place where the gate would be opened, designated by Yamamoto. Sure, the agreed time was ages away, sometime after breakfast tomorrow, but he still needed sleep. His thoughts drifted to his sisters' faces. He got up suddenly and pushed himself out of his body. He walked lightly to his sister's room and peeked in. They were sleeping soundly. After looking at them fondly, he then walked down the stairs. Opening the door silently, he slipped out and closed it behind him. Breathing a sigh of relief, he proceeded to step on the footpath. "So, you really are going?" Ichigo stopped, knowing who it was without turning around. "Yeah." His father looked at the back of his son's Shinigami form. "Do you still have that pendant I gave you?" Yeah, his hands fingered the pendant, but he did not turn around to face his father. "Good. Keep it. Mum would have wanted you to have it." A pause. "Are you coming back?" "After the holidays." "I see. I'll take care of your body then." Another pause. "Idiot. You think your sisters are going to let you lie in the same position all holidays while having a blank look on your face?" Crap. He had forgotten about that. "Shut up, old man." "Ha. Goodbye, son." "Goodbye." He clutched the pendant in his hand in front of the Urahara shop. He raised his hand to knock when the door suddenly slid open. He was met with the dark gaze of Kisuke Urahara. A few minutes later, the former captain guided him down into the training area. "The equipment is ready," Urahara said after a while. Ichigo scowled, confused. "How did you know I was wearing a sandal hat?" "Oh, it's obvious." The scowl deepened. "I know it's obvious that I'm going to Soul Society, but even you should have known that I'm supposed to be traveling at a different time, at a different gate." "Oh?" Ichigo sighed. He wouldn't get any information out of Urahara. How he knew what he knew was beyond Ichigo's understanding. ZZZT. The gate shot up. "Anyway, thanks a lot, Sandal Hat." He stepped in through the gate. "I'll be back after the holidays." ZZZT. The gate closed. Urahara looked at where the gate was. "I wonder what the boy is going to do." "Damn it." Ichigo cursed. "I knew I should have waited. Damn that Sandal Hat. He decides to put me in this hate when that stupid cleaner is behind me." HHH. If anyone had heard Ichigo at that moment, they would have questioned his manliness. Even so, it's hard to act manly when a massive, spirit-eating boulder is rolling towards you at velocities close to the speed of light. "Damn you, Sandal Hat." "Achoo." Tesai Tsukubishi looked up in surprise. Urahara looked back. "You got a cold." "Nah, must be these dusty boxes we were working with." Ichigo lay on the soft grass, his body relishing in the comfort and peace that they had been deprived of for the last few moments. It was still night at Soul Society, and, as he sat up, he guessed that they would start looking for him when he didn't turn up where Yamamoto had said. He looked behind him at the white walls that encompassed the court of pure souls. He said the last bit aloud. "Pure souls, my ass." He muttered when he remembered that Rukia was there. Groaning, he stood up and started walking slowly towards it. Then, he grinned and retraced his steps. This would be a good time to visit Kakushiba. And those of you who are unfamiliar with this name, it's the fireworks lady that shot up Ichigo and his friends in that gigantic cannon. Rukia stood on her balcony, feeling quite happy, even though she refused to believe it herself. Ichigo is coming tomorrow. No, he'd be coming today, since it was already morning. A twinge of anxiety fluttered over her. She hadn't seen him in about 8 months. She wouldn't tell him that she worried about him. She wouldn't even tell herself that. That idiot better not have done anything stupid to hurt himself. No sooner had the words materialized in her brain, she heard the familiar clack 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 of the wooden hammer meeting the wooden emergency sign. Clack clack. Instantly Byakuya was awake. He rushed out of his bedroom, still wearing his sleepwear, only pausing to grab his soul slayer. "Boo. We have an intruder in the court of pure souls," announced one Shinigami, looking quite proud that he knew before the others. "What?" A passing Shinigami looked at him. I said the proud Shinigami was about to relay his precious message, but was cut off. The second Shinigami turned away and shouted, "Hey guys. Wake up, we have an intruder." "Oh wait a minute, I was just saying." The first Shinigami looked angry as he was cut off once again as a sleepy Shinigami rolled out of his quarters. "Did you hear that, guys? An intruder. What? Where? Look. I know." No one looked his way. The announcing Shinigami took one look at the frantic growing crowd of pushing and yelling. Sighing, he let out an air bubble. Rukia quickly walked off her balcony, into her room, and down the stairs, but not before quickly changing into her Shinigami uniform and grabbing her soul slayer. "Damn it, just when Ichigo is about to come, we have another invasion." She walked outside and ran to the main court. Ichiki Byakuya stood alone in the main court. Then, about 3 seconds later, he was joined with masses of Shinigami, most of them, to Byakuya's displeasure, were wearing their uniforms as if the day had just started. He only had noted this because he, in fact, was wearing his sleepwear. Of course, no one said anything. They were much more concerned about the alert than Kichiki Byakuya's choice of clothes. However, they did note that he in fact was Kichiki Byakuya and left him the customary 2-meter radius while they waited. No one noticed the orange-haired Shinigami that appeared out of nowhere, then, suddenly, appeared again next to the 6th Division captain. "Oh? I must say, Kichiki Byakuya, you look quite dashing with those new clothes." Kichiki Byakuya whirled around in the familiar voice. Something clicked and a loud roar of laughter that sounded suspiciously like a certain red-haired vice captain was heard. Before Byakuya could find the offender, laughs started bursting out of nowhere, and then finally the massive Shinigami that were in the main court started rolling along the tiled ground, laughing till their insides hurt. For once, the cool, composed 6th Division captain didn't say anything. Of course, he was still cool and composed, if not slightly flustered. He just glared at the orange-haired Shinigami. Not a normal "I hope you die" glare, but one of those rare "I shall personally grind you to bits" glares. The crowd was still laughing, and Ichigo was still smirking. Byakuya, of course, just kept glaring at his glare. That was until a blur seemed to split the crowd in half and Ichigo turned to see the bottom of his sandal. In the air, of course. And rushing to meet his face at a very uncomfortable speed. "Wabam." They stopped laughing and gaped in wonder. This orange-haired Shinigami, one who dared insult the Kichiki Byakuya, was just taken down by a much smaller Shinigami, and a girl at that. And nothing wrong with being a girl, I assure you, but imagine some guy teasing Kichiki Byakuya and getting away with it. Then a girl comes along and wabam, yeah, you get the point. Kichiki Byakuya let his "I shall personally grind you to bits" glare dissipate and changed it to a half glare, half smirk. Half because it was hard for anyone, even Kichiki Byakuya, to glare at someone that was getting stomped on by Kichiki Rukia. Half smirk because it is, after all, Kichiki Byakuya and he never smirks fully. Whilst the crowd was busy gawking in amazement, he quickly stepped out of the main court. He didn't want to be seen. Unfortunately, he ran into the very famous Toshiro Hitsugaya, smirking rudely as always, but somehow this one seemed to be rather annoying and knowing. He would have stopped to tell him off, but by the look on the prodigy's face, he had heard everything that had happened. "Damn you, Kurosaki Ichigo," Byakuya thought, while Toshiro was thinking, ha ha ha. That was classic. He secretly disliked the proud captain of the 6th Division. However, he also valued his life, so he kept his smirk to a smirk and said nothing else. "Ichigo. Ow, okay, enough already. Have you learned your lesson?" Rukia's voice was like ice. Ichigo winced. He had once felt it when Hitsugaya Toshiro had gotten mad over some guy who had tripped over and fell on a certain vice captain. The temperature of the court of pure souls dropped by about 30 degrees. That, however, was nothing compared to the iciness in Rukia's tone. He smirked silently to himself. This was going to shorten his life by a large amount, but it would be worth it. He took a small breath and said nope. The Shinigami crowd slowly backed away. There was a flaring spiritual power belonging to a certain someone that they didn't want to mess with. Only a few remained, namely Toshiro Hitsugaya, who was there because he secretly wanted to see if any more funny things happened, but there was no way he was going to tell this arrogant orange-haired substitute Shinigami that. Momo Hinamori, who was there because a certain captain was there, Abarai Renji, who was there because he didn't want to leave Rukia the job of bashing the orange-haired Shinigami, he wanted a turn as well, and he didn't want to leave Rukia alone with a certain orange-haired Shinigami, and Kenpachi Zaraki, who was there because he wanted to see if Ichigo had gotten stronger and wanted to fight. And wouldn't take no for an answer because he hadn't fought in quite a long time and also wanted to see if Ichigo knew anything about the alarm. Gosh, Hess quick. They lay on the soft grass together. She was feeling fine. He was feeling fine. Well, not as fine as her, due to the numerous amounts of bruises that had started appearing on his body. His mind drifted back to the events that happened just a couple of hours ago. Flashback. Stomp, stomp, stomp. The rest of the group that were there around them had somehow gathered a large sweat drop at the top of their forehead. And it dropped simultaneously. Rukia-san, it was the quiet Hinamori that spoke up first. Huh? A puzzled Rukia slowly looked down at her feet, or more precisely under her feet. A dazzled Ichigo looked back at her. Oh. She grinned. Sorry, sorry. And smiled a perfect smile to Ichigo. The rest of the group had found that big drop of sweat again. Like a smile was going to fix up the Shinigami. Surprisingly enough, Ichigo only let out a groan and sat up, scratching his head like nothing had happened. Renji looked on. Now that is definitely weird. Ichigo, not getting mad at Rukia for pummeling him. He's probably happy that he had gotten to see Rukia again. Toshiro Hitsugaya let out a loud sigh, visibly disappointed that nothing else funny was going to happen. He turned to leave when he noticed that Kenpachi had opened his mouth to say something. Ichigo, did you know the alarms have been set off? Toshiro deadpanned. Hadn't Zaraki figured out by now that Ichigo was the cause of the alarm? He didn't say anything though. He wasn't scared of the 11th Division captain, it was just that people learned to stay out of dangerous places when you reached 150 years old. Toshiro's deadpanning was reflected in the others' faces. Ichigo spoke up first. Hey Zaraki, I was the alarm. Oh. Renji snapped out of his deadpanning after Ichigo. Hahaha. You mean you didn't know? You dumbus. He also snapped back to reality the next second. Omikrup. Renji ran out of the main court screaming, with a bloodthirsty Zaraki behind him, unsheathing his sword. The others watched two run out into the night. Hinamori snapped out of her deadpan next. And blushed. Shiro-chan, it's getting late. Can you walk me to my division? What? Toshiro looked at her. Then he looked away, his face as red paint. Oh no, Hinamori began again. No. What? Now it was Hinamori's turn to be surprised. Only if Toshiro begins. Only if. She hung on to his words. Only if you quit calling me Shiro-chan. Arasu, you'll come? Hinamori looked at him again, her eyes pleading. Fine. A scowling Hitsugaya stomped off. Then he abruptly stopped when Hinamori wrapped her arms around him from behind. Thanks. Shiro-chan. Don't call me Shiro-chan. Hinamori grinned. It was fun seeing him get so worked up. They continued walking to the path that would take them to the 5th Division quarters. Snickers were heard behind them. Toshiro turned around, his scowl deepening. Shiro-chan. Ichigo mimicked, the mischievous grin coming back to his face. Rukia tried to stop him but failed, breaking into fits of suppressed laughter. The main court suddenly felt a lot colder. Shiro-chan. A reprimanding gaze and the temperature went back to normal. Fine, we're going. Toshiro stuck his fingers in his ears, trying to ignore the hysterical laughter that floated from behind them. Then flashback. After that, Ichigo thought, Rukia and I went up here. He rolled over to his side to watch the face of the raven-haired Shinigami that had changed his life. She was gazing into the stars. You know, you can go there. What? She scowled, not averting her gaze. The stars. Whatever. She glanced at him, giving him a whatever look. What other look would she give him? XD. Fine. Don't believe me. They drifted off into silence. Ichigo opened his mouth and yawned, in spite of himself. He hadn't slept and he was understandably tired. Boy, Ichigo. What? Do missed you. Same, Ichigo thought. He turned over to his side. Silence. Oh Ichigo. He sat up straight. What? Are you even listening to me? She had sat up as well. He gave her a sideways glance. I am. No, you aren't. Why didn't you say anything? I did. No, you didn't. Well, I said something to myself. That doesn't count. Yes it does. No, it doesn't. Yes it does. Rukia sighed inwardly. Ichigo was hopeless. What did you say to yourself anyway? Ichigo answered, still half asleep. What did you? Okay, Ichigo mumbled, not waking up even after Rukia's yelling. Yes, he really was tired. So? Oh, he said he was almost falling down now due to his tiredness. What? He leant over, his intention to tell her what he had thought, but all of a sudden his head felt so heavy that he promptly lay down on her lap. Ichigo. Ichigo was not in his right senses. He was now 3/4 asleep and he didn't mind falling asleep on Rukia's lap. "Oh ye," he said to myself, he was muttering into her clothes. I said, same. A few seconds later his breathing evened out and he was asleep, leaving Rukia to wonder what the hell he meant by same and what she was going to do the next morning when people found out that Ichigo was sleeping on her lap. Now, what did I say? Oh yeah, I said I missed him. And he said, same. She smiled contentedly to herself. Stuff tomorrow and stuff what other people think. She absent-mindedly twirled his hair in her fingers. I'm tired as well. Luckily the night was warm so she wouldn't get any sickness. Lying down, she drifted off into dreamland with his hair still entwined in her fingers. Renji groaned. Now, this groan wasn't your typical, oh crap, homework, groan, it was more like, oh crap, all my bones are dislocated, my ligaments are stretched, and if I move, I'll break, sort of groan. He had been chazzed around all night for laughing at a confused Zaraki. Arg. Damn that Zaraki. He had to take me seriously. The sunlight came streaming in through his window. Renji averted his gaze to his table, where his clock lay. 5 a.m. Vice Captain's meeting in 1 hour. No, this time it was a combined meeting due to the appearance of Ichigo. He closed his eyes. But, when he couldn't get back to sleep, he rolled out of bed, grunting as his muscles stretched and changed into his Shinigami uniform. He was thinking of taking a little stroll before the Vice Captain's meeting. It would do him good. Or so he thought. His little stroll ended prematurely when he saw Ichigo and Rukia sleeping together. He didn't know how long he gaped at them, it was really something he couldn't believe. 1. Rukia and Ichigo fought over every single word, how could they possibly end up sleeping together? The good way, he thought, blushing furiously. Not that those two sleeping together were good, he thought with jealousy. 2. Sleeping together outside. What was Rukia thinking? Actually, what was Ichigo thinking? That bastard, lying on her lap, couldn't think of the word. Or, more accurately, he didn't want to say the word that he had learned on his travels in the real world. Boyfriend. An involuntary shudder. Geez. This was going to put him in a bad mood all day. Why? It's not like Ichigo stood there exasperated while Ichigo and Rukia slept peacefully. He stomped away and then a little grin formed on his face. Itachu. Renji sang out sweetly below his captain's quarters. He thought it was sweet. The birds that were hanging around the captain's quarters didn't. They screeched and howled like their life depended on it, and it did, and flew away, gibbering, in their language, how they came up with the worst wake-up jokes possible. An unruffled Kichiki Byakuya slowly walked onto his balcony. Gilded would be a better word. And also wearing his captain's robes once again. He would definitely not be caught a second time. He saw it was Renji and frowned. He had remembered that laugh that sounded distinctly like Renji when that brat humiliated him. What? Oh, Kichiki Taichu, Renji said with a sickening smile, we still have 45 minutes till the meeting. Wanna come take a stroll? No. Byakuya turned and Gilded slowly back to his bedroom. Oh. That's too bad then. I guess I'll have to spy on Rukia and Ichigo all by myself. Byakuya stopped. Are you implying, Renji, that something might be happening between my sister and that brat? Even though he knew full well that there was something happening between his sister and Kurosaki Ichigo, and it wasn't just friendship. Ever since Ichigo had left to the living world, Rukia had moped around. Well, not exactly moped around, she still did her duties, but she lacked the energy to do anything. Even with Renji around, she still lacked the will. When that brat showed up last night, he noticed, with interest, that somehow she felt more alive. Which was ironic really, seeing as she was dead already. They were all dead. But Kurosaki Ichigo wasn't. He was alive. And he made Rukia feel alive. Byakuya's thoughts were interrupted by Renji. Taicho. Renji's voice sounded a bit softer than usual. Yes. Don't worry about it. His usual look of glee was replaced by seriousness, something that was unusual. Byakuya looked at him one last time before going back to his bedroom. Renji had obviously been thinking about what he was thinking. Okay, Yamamoto's eyes scanned the room. We aren't all here. Renji snickered loudly. Yamamoto's eyes flickered over to the vice captain of the 6th division. Byakuya, if anything, looked unimpressed. Abarai Renji. Yes sir. I presume, by your earlier actions, that you know where Kurosaki Ichigo is. Yes sir. At him? Yes sir. Renji ran back to the place where he had seen Ichigo and Rukia. They were still there, lying on the grass, sleeping. HMMPH. A mischievous grin planted itself on his face. He took a deep breath. Wakey, wakey. Instantly the surrounding area was filled with flying birds. The birds that had rested on Kichiki Taichi's residence had now moved to where Ichigo and Rukia were, note the past tense, sleeping. They had settled in with their feathered friends, thinking that they were safe from a certain red-haired Shinigami who had a wondrous voice. Unfortunately, they were mistaken. The vice captain had graciously enlightened them yet again, and they flew up in the air yelling, in their language, obscenities about the singer's mother. Ichigo leapt 5 feet into the air. Well, he would have leapt 5 feet into the air if it weren't for a certain Shinigami who had sat up immediately. The back of his head met the bottom of her chin, and they both collapsed, knocked out. Renji sighed. He had been so considerate, waking them up nicely, but no, they had to fake waking up and go back to sleep. Sighing, he picked up the orange-haired Shinigami with one hand and the raven-haired Shinigami with the other. Back in the meeting room, silence prevailed. Yamato Taichu? The speaker was none other than Momo Hinamori. Yes. Even though Kurosaki-kun is going to be Taichu, what about the other 2 spots of captain? Yamamoto looked at her. All we can do is elect new ones. Murmurs passed throughout the room. Yes, this was going to happen sooner, but we weren't sure about the exact details of Aizen's departure. More murmurs. Now that we know, all we need to do is hold the general captain election. He paused, the murmurs were annoying him, though he didn't show it. He looked sternly at Hinamori, who was whispering to the 10th Division captain, who was getting redder by the minute. Since the 3rd Division and the 9th Division do not have captains to challenge, any Shinigami is allowed to take part against an existing captain. While discussing who was going to challenge who, the sliding door slid open loudly. There stood Renji, holding a dazed Ichigo by the back of his Shinigami clothes, and, Byakuya noted with a tiny hint of amusement, holding Rukia in his arms like a newborn child. If Byakuya could get any more amused, then this next moment would be it. The vice captain abruptly dropped the orange-haired Shinigami on the meeting floor and then placed Rukia gently outside the meeting hall so that she was leaning against the wall, still sleeping. Oh, what did you have to do that for? Ichigo was now sitting, his eyes glaring at his red-haired friend. Shut up. I don't want to hear that from you, who dropped me down like a sack of potatoes. Shut up. No. Yes. No. Yes. No. And they were about to continue on their largely productive argument, which, by the way, was well structured and had a couple of good points, when Kichiki Byakuya coughed. Silence prevailed. Yamamoto motioned for the 2 to take their places, trying not to rub his temples with his idle hands. As you all know, Kurosaki Ichigo is now here to temporarily fill in the position of captain over the 5th Division. The captains and vice captains nodded. Good, that's settled. The old man looked around. Oh yes, Abarai Renji, you may be happy to know that there will be an all-out contest to see who takes the place of the 3rd squad captain or the 9th squad captain. The others fidgeted. Like they didn't know this was coming. Of course Renji would have been placed in the captain's position. He had, after all, learned his lesson. The meeting continued. Itsugaya felt bored. He looks bored, thought Hinamori. She reached over and squeezed his hand. Okay, he definitely didn't look bored now. You can't be bored and blushing at the same time. The redness contrasted with the whiteness of his hair. That same redness attracted Yamamoto. He looked over to the 150-year-old boy with amusement. Before you all leave, Hitsugaya Taicho will accompany Kurosaki Taicho today to work on his captaincy duties. Hitsugaya glanced up at the old man. Was that a glint of amusement in his eye? An annoyed Hitsugaya stomped through the court of pure souls. Needless to say, an annoyed Hitsugaya meant a temporary season of winter. And half-frozen bodies to anyone who came within a meter radius to the prodigy. Of all of the people Toshiro seethed. I have to take care of Ichigo. And of all of the people, that old geezer decided to choose me. Chuckling evilly to himself, Ichigo followed the miniature blizzard. Oh, Shiro-chan. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. A large vein proceeded to show itself on the back of the short captain's head. Don't call me that, Carrot Top. Tushwi, are you so angry? Ichigo asked, even though he fully knew the situation. Rukia had informed him of it before he left on his teaching tour with the prodigy. Apparently Toshiro and Hinamori usually ate lunch together, but couldn't because of Ichigo. Ichigo had thought that this would be the perfect situation to get the child prodigy mad. Rukia, on the other hand, had other plans. She and Ichigo would have a picnic lunch together, and Toshiro and Hinamori could go somewhere together while they were having it. She told Hinamori this, and she was delighted to have someone so thoughtful as her new captain. Secretly she was worried that she would have to miss a day with her Shiro-chan. Ichigo promptly told her that it was Rukia's idea, but it got Hinamori thanking them all over again that they both had to ask her to stop. When she skipped off, Rukia said in a rather sighing tone, she's in love. Rukia then turned to Ichigo and said, go tell Hitsugaya Taicho. And behave. And here he was, behaving, if not having a little fun. Silence. Yo, I ask you a question, shorty. The temperature dropped yet again, and Ichigo thought he better lay up on the provoking statements for a while, unless he wanted to end up inside of a freezer. It was a good choice. Teaching proceeded in a cold manner, literally, and lunch neared. Toshiro's stomach growled. Which reminded him of the fact that, since Ichigo was here, he couldn't eat with Hinamori. Because of this he started saying random comments about how Ichigo was going to make a bad captain, how he only beat Byakuya by chance, how he had no chance with Rukia etc. Ichigo, on the other hand, funnily enough did not get angry. He did however say, wouldn't it be funny if Hinamori suddenly got a large load of paperwork, out of nowhere. Itsugaya stopped his comments and proceeded to work in a more icy tone than ever. Ichigo chuckled to himself. This is too good, he thought, but he was secretly annoyed that the short captain had dared say that he had no chance with Rukia, not like he cared anyway. The lunch bell rang. Hitsugaya continued like nothing had happened. Hey, Hitsugaya Taicho, let's get something to eat. I'm hungry. Ichigo explained. Ashiro gave him a cold look but followed Ichigo outside the door. Ichigo looked around for Rukia. Yep, there she was, smiling prettily while holding a lunch basket. Smiling prettily? Where did that come from? Ichigo scratched the back of his head. Hitsugaya, wait here. Ichigo said as he promptly ran off to where Rukia was waiting, leaving the short captain to scowl at the scenery in front of him. As he reached her, he looked at her up and down. Something was different. She looked different. Ah, it must be her clothes. I haven't seen her, did you tell him? Rukia asked. He snapped back to reality. Nope. Baka. How the hell is he supposed to know what to do? He replied, scratching his head. He was about to say something else, like he didn't care what happened to the snotty brat, when he was interrupted. Shut up. Look, Rukia hissed. They looked over to where Hitsugaya was standing, and suddenly the temperature went back to normal. They saw the reason running over to the surprised captain. Rukia, even though she was Rukia, was still a girl and wanted to wait to see what happened next, as throughout the Court of Pure Souls, the relationship between the 10th Division captain and the 5th Division vice captain was one that many a Shinigami pondered upon, and it definitely was top on their list of couples to be. Rukia prided herself with knowing such knowledge, though she kept it to herself, as she knew that Byakuya Nayasama wouldn't be very pleased if he found her gossiping. Even though she did know a lot, she didn't know that the next on the list of couples to be was her paired up with a certain new captain. Funnily enough, Byakuya knew of this, but he didn't say anything, as, after all, he did have an image to keep in front of his little sister, and there was no way that he was going to tell her that he had been sneaking around, trying to catch up on the latest gossip on his sister. No, he wasn't overprotective. Not overprotective at all. Sadly, Ichigo was new to the Court of Pure Souls, and he didn't give a damn about the relationship between his vice captain and the short prodigy. He probably would have given a damn if he found out that most of the in the Court of Pure Souls thought that he and Rukia were more than just friends. He looked down at Rukia, who was watching them with undivided interest. He looked away, embarrassed. Even if he was Ichigo, it still is hard to keep a straight face when your girlfriend friend who is a girl, openly stares at a couple. He grabbed her slender arm and marched off. Come on, I'm hungry. What? Oh come on Ichigo, grow up. But I have my captain training, and she cut him off by placing a finger to his lips. He was about to say that Hitsugaya was going to kill him, which was probable. Since when have you been so girly? Rukia asked him, with a mischievous smile. Since what? Shut up. I'm not girly. This comment hurt his pride, especially coming from her. R2. I'm not. R2. Ichigo opened his mouth to say another I'm not, but he stopped when he felt Rukia's fingers grabbing onto his hands. Look, just come with me, okay? Fine, he mumbled and allowed himself to be led off to Rukia's hometown. Are going to kill me when I come back, you know. Shut up. Defeated sigh of air. Actually, Hitsugaya wasn't thinking about killing anyone at that particular moment. Quite the opposite really. Hinamori had explained everything to him and he realized that Ichigo was just hiding it from him all along. Now, if someone else had explained to him what was happening, he might have called out his ice dragon, however, it was Hinamori talking to him here, so he let his anger slide. They sat up on the rooftop, gazing at the sky. They had finished their lunch rather quickly, well, Toshiro had finished his lunch rather quickly, anyway. In front of a very embarrassed Hinamori, he had gulped down all the helpings of food in less than 5 minutes. She had scolded him for eating too much, but inside she was secretly glad because he had eaten her food so enthusiastically. She rolled over, gazing at her young friend. Did you like it? Like what? He was so dense. The food, she said in a flat voice. Oh. He turned over to his side, his back facing her face. Yeah, too liked it. A few moments of silence. You're a really good cook. Thank you. Awkward silence. Aren't you looking at me? She asked, truly puzzled. It's nothing. Hinamori frowned. Shiro-chan was being a bit weird today. Shiro-chan, she sang sweetly, look at me when you talk. No. There was no way in hell or Soul Society, for that matter, that he was going to face her, blushing like a beetroot. When she said his name like that, blushing like a beetroot was over. It was more like his face was a beetroot. What? She sounded like she hadn't even listened to him. I said, no. I'll make you. No, you won't. Hinamori grinned. It was her childhood friend and she knew just how to make him move. She slowly raised herself on one elbow and then grabbed him by the ribs. She knew where his ticklish spots were, she thought, as she tickled him from behind. Wahey, haha, stop that, haha. Hitsugaya was laughing uncontrollably. Leave it to Hinamori to know everything about him. Well, almost everything. The Shiro summoned up his remaining strength and turned to face her. She was still tickling him, so he grabbed her and tickled her back. The sounds of laughter could be heard for miles, but of course, it was lunchtime and most of the Shinigami were indoors. Suddenly the laughter stopped. As it was, the two were on a roof, and a roof is, after all, slanted. Their tickling round had ended up with the both of them rolling towards the end of the roof, rolling towards the ground. It was quite a drop. The Shiro braced himself for the impact, making sure that he was the one hitting the ground. Thud. The two had fortunately hit a grassy slope, tumbled down, and came to rest at the foot of a sakura tree. Hitsugaya was knocked out from the impact, but Hinamori was still conscious. Conscious, however, with an unconscious Hitsugaya on top of her, his chin resting on her shoulder. Hinamori blushed furiously. Shiro-chan. Shiro-chan. This time a bit louder. For a second she contemplated staying like this, after all, this was probably as close as she was going to get to the white-haired prodigy. Since he did nothing to notice her feelings. Shiro-chan. This time Hitsugaya answered. His eyes half opened as he put his hands down in front of him to prop himself up. Are you okay, Hinamori? She nodded, barely, but her face was getting redder by the second. Hitsugaya looked confused for about 1 second, then he looked down to where Hinamori was looking. So that's what he was holding himself up on. Wah. This wah, greatly minimized by the way, was joined by a female voice that screamed quite loudly, the words that no man wants to hear from his girlfriend, or potential girlfriend for that matter, pervert. Hi Ichigo. Yuck. Kigo, that was disgusting. Mizuru winced, wiping off the beads of well you know. Shut up, you just sneezed a second ago. Kigo said, wiping his nose. They were in the middle of an eatery and were in the process of analyzing the aspects of the human body female species, namely girl watching. Ha. At least it was controlled. HMMPH Kigo looked away. It's because you're a girl. But it's weird, Mizuru said, as his gaze was diverted again, this time by an older woman. I don't have a cold. Same, Kigo said wanly, as he followed Mizuru gaze. Oh, Ranjiku Matsumoto sighed after finishing off the book, The Princess and the Picnic. Now, she declared to her captain, who was acting rather strangely of late, that it was a real love story. The captain looked up, obviously not listening to a word she said, just that it was a force of habit to look up when someone was talking to him. Matsumoto had once told him he did this because he was shorter than everyone else, and it took 2 full days to defrost her. Despite this incident, she was still willing to tease her captain to bits. What? I said, this is a real love story. She held the book in her hand and waved it over the couch. Oh. At the mention of the word love she felt her captain go rigid. She wondered if it had anything to do with a certain 5th Division vice captain. Hitsugaya bent down to finish his paperwork, which he left during the morning to look after Ichigo. It was after lunch, the time most were lazing around. Hitsugaya Taicho, you don't want to know what happened. No. Matsumoto shuddered. So cold. An evil grin spread across her face. She knew that the subject of love was continually avoided in the 10th Division, well in the hearing range of the captain, who was actually failing at love at the very moment. Anyway, she announced in an eerily cheery voice, I'll tell you what happens. She cautiously looked up from her couch. Her captain was still bending over his desk, completing paperwork, though it was obvious that he had heard what she had said, despite the fact that he didn't say anything. So, there was this prince, and he met this princess. She peeked up from behind her couch. And do you know how they met? Hitsugaya sighed. It was obvious that he couldn't get much paperwork done with his lazy vice captain, well lazing around. And plus, he had to put up with her annoying voice, telling him an annoying story. He might as well listen. No, I don't know how they met. Do enlighten me. He said in a sickly sweet tone that could probably rival Rukia's acting voice. He picked up his cup of tea and proceeded to sip it in an annoyingly adult manner. Matsumoto looked at her captain, delighted, completely ignoring his sickly sweet tone. Well, it happened like this. The princess was so bored of her castle that one day she decided to take a picnic. She looked up in surprise as she saw her captain nearly choke on his tea. She raised an eyebrow. And it seemed like it was getting a bit colder. So she went on her picnic, but she got a bit bored by herself. So she decided to invite her childhood friend, who was the neighboring prince. At that time, they didn't have any feelings for each other though. She looked up again in surprise when her captain had choked yet again and the temperature had gone down. A lot. Is something wrong, Hitsugaya Taicho? She watched him carefully. Maybe she shouldn't have told him the story after all. But this kind of behavior, even for him, was quite different. Nothing's wrong, Hitsugaya managed to squeak out. He stood up shakily. Bathroom, and he was off, leaving a very puzzled Matsumoto behind. Aw, I didn't get the good part. She lay back on the couch to read the last paragraph again. The princess and her prince skipped happily down the sunny lane. The princess held her prince's hand while they skipped, and in her other hand she was swinging a picnic basket. And they lived happily ever after. The end. Far away, in some corner or another of Seoul society, the princess was skipping happily down a sunny lane. Actually, it was Rukia, and she wasn't skipping. She was, however, holding her prince's hand, except for the small fact that it was Ichigo, and the only reason why she was holding his hand was because she was dragging him along the ground. It was such a picturesque moment. Come on, you idiot. Look, we're here. Rukia had stopped pulling Ichigo and had led him up to an overhang which looked over the 78th district of Rukongai. Ichigo stopped rubbing his arm and looked up. It was now mid-afternoon and the warm sun was comfortable on his back. The city actually looked decent from here. It looks nice. Yeah. The two stood there, looking down at the city, which Rukia had grown up in. It was so different from what he had imagined, Ichigo decided. Standing behind Rukia, he noticed what had caught his attention when he was looking for her when he was with Hitsugaya. She was wearing contemporary-style clothes, which was strange since they were in Seoul society. Now that he came to think of it, he had only seen her in her school uniform, one of Yuzu's dresses, her Shinigami uniform, and, once, in her kimono. This was the first time he had seen her wearing jeans. Boy, Rukia. She didn't stop looking down at the town. What's with your clothes? Huh? This time she turned around to look at him. She looked down at what she was wearing. Oh, these, she shrugged, almost embarrassed. Well, I got some tailors to make me some clothes that were more your style. Huh? Ichigo looked confused. My style? She blushed furiously. No, idiot, I meant the style of the living world. She turned away from him. Ichigo, being Ichigo, got absolutely none of this, but he did understand that Rukia was turning away from him and that he had done something wrong. He shrugged. Well, no need to get so mad about it, geez, I was just going to say that it looks good on you. As if realizing what he just said, his face went red. Rukia turned around and all of a sudden, the ground beneath them had just become a whole lot more interesting. Oh, the silence was unbearable. Anyway, aren't we going to have this, picnic? Ichigo asked, still looking at the ground, with one hand scratching the back of his neck. Why yeah. Rukia hurried past him to lay the cloth on the ground underneath a large overhanging tree. Here, let me help. Ichigo took the basket from Rukia and started laying the contents on the mat. Slowly, but surely, a large bead of sweat started to form at the back of his head. Rukia? Yeah? Why aren't there any bowls? The large bead of sweat was mirrored by Rukia. Ichigo sighed. Leave it to you to get everything, except the bowls. Hey. It's because I was working so hard on the meal. Yeah, so hard that you forgot to bring something to eat it in. Shut up. Anyway, look, she pointed to 2 pairs of chopsticks. At least we have them. Oh yeah, and what am I supposed to do with chopsticks without a bowl? Eat from the container, idiot. Rukia proceeded to break up her pair of chopsticks and grabbed a large helping of noodles from the container. I've done it lots of times, she announced proudly. The large bead of sweat dropped. Geez, fine. Ichigo sighed as he scooted closer to Rukia. He waited till she had started chewing on her noodles before digging his chopsticks into the container. He just realized how hungry he was and proceeded to eat the noodles. However, being Ichigo, he took such a large helping that he couldn't eat it all in one bite, so he let some of the noodles hang down over the container. Rukia finished her first mouthful, swallowed, and said, yuck. Don't slobber all over the container. Ichigo, with his mouth still full, replied angrily, it wouldn't have happened if Fumin had brought a bower. Rukia stared at him. What? Ichigo rolled his eyes, and Rukia shook her head, muttering to herself about how people shouldn't talk with their mouth full. She took another helping of the noodles, not noticing that because Ichigo had let the noodles hang loose over the container, she had accidentally gotten some of his noodles. Ichigo, on the other hand, decided to let Rukia win all the arguments while his mouth was still full, but as soon as he would finish, he never finished his next thought. What he saw directly in front of him and only a few inches away was a very startled Rukia. His face soon turned the same color as hers as they both realized that they were eating the same noodle, and because of the shock, they just kept chewing slowly, coming closer and closer and closer and… What the heck? Ichigo was basically pleading for his body to stop moving forward. It's just Rukia. Rukia, on the other hand, just kept coming closer and closer till all that was left between them was the one noodle. Ichigo looked at her eyes. They were wide, open, and innocent. Their lips met for the tiniest of seconds. And then, just as quick as it had started, it finished. They suddenly recoiled, as if realizing what they had done. Seconds, then minutes passed. That was mine. Rukia broke the uncomfortable silence. Huh? Ichigo didn't understand, and Rukia just laughed silently inside of herself. Ichigo was still young, after all. That was my noodle. What? The astonishment quickly turned to anger. What do you mean that was yours? It was in my chopsticks. Rukia turned around. Yeah, whatever, she said in an annoyingly airy voice. Ichigo growled under his breath. Damn you. Rukia turned back, facing him. Ichigo's angry face was just too funny, and he was staring at her like he wanted to bore a hole through her body with his eyes. She scrunched up her face and poked out her tongue. Naya. Ichigo sighed. Damn those mangas. The stars shone on Soul Society. Well, twinkling. The 10th Division captain noted this as he rolled his head back, looking at the sky. Itsugaya Toshiro stood in front of the vice captain's quarters of the 5th Division. He ran a hand through his white-blue hair. It was pretty late and not many were around, well none walking around this area of the 5th Division. He lifted his hand to knock. And stopped. There was no way that he was going to knock on her door this time of night. She'd be sleeping anyway. He turned around, quietly, as all captains do, then stopped. But what if she wasn't sleeping? And he really needed to apologize to her for what he had done. Geez, just thinking about it made him blush. He turned around again, now facing her door. Once again he lifted his hand to knock. The night seemed to grow quieter. Arg, stuff it. He pulled back his clenched fist and knocked. Well, he tried to. His fist swung through empty air, then met the forehead of the pretty vice captain. The walking vice captain now fell backwards, quite fast, but Toshiro was faster. He quickly stepped behind her and caught her. Whoops. He just knocked out the person that he wanted to apologize to. This did not bode well. Rukia. Ichigo looked at his Shinigami friend, sprawled out in the sparse grass, stargazing. It's late. So? Rukia didn't pull her eyes off the stars. So, it's dark. Damn Rukia, she never listened to him. And we have to get back. No, we don't. Still stargazing. Your brother will kill me. That initiated some movement. Rukia pulled her gaze away from the stars and rolled onto her side, facing Ichigo. What? Ichigo suddenly was aware of her proximity. She didn't say anything. He really will. Ichigo widened his eyes and waved his one free arm around in the air. Rukia still didn't say anything, she just continued staring at him. For some reason she was seriously making him uncomfortable. What? Maybe she's thinking about what happened this afternoon. Nothing. Rukia pulled her gaze away from his face. Ichigo let out an inward sigh. Fine, let's go. What was with that? Yeah. After packing up the picnic, Ichigo slung the bag over his shoulder, school bag style. They walked together in silence down the hill. Ichigo peeked a glance at her. She sensed him looking at her and looked upwards in a frown. What? Nothing. Ichigo turned his head forward again. How come she could look so coolly at him, then when he even looked at her for 1 second, she got angry. He stomped forward. Boy Ichigo. Her voice came from behind him. Yeah? He slowed down a bit, letting her catch up with his long stride. Are you afraid of my brother? A moment of silence. What? Ichigo was flustered. Well? Rukia asked again. You Ichigo stopped walking. Thinking about what to say, and walking was too much for his body and brain. He mumbled something incoherent and then started walking as fast as he could, but Rukia was too fast for him. What? Say that again. She teased, I thought you said yes. She quickened her stride to keep up with Ichigo. HMMPH. Say it, I didn't hear it properly. Well, why wouldn't you be? He's so cold and his freaky sword that turns into tiny blades. Ah ha ha, so you are scared of him. Rukia giggled. Ichigo was actually scared of someone. Shut up. They walked a few more minutes in silence before Rukia piped up again, this time a bit quieter. Hey Ichigo. What? Back then, when you fought Nai-sama. Ichigo kept walking. Rukia didn't finish her question. At that time Ichigo knew what she was talking about. At that time, he repeated, I wasn't scared for some reason. I mean, I felt his power. It's just that I was so intent on saving you. Suddenly the ground seemed very interesting. Oh, so you weren't scared because of me? Rukia jokingly asked in an annoyingly sweet tone. Shut up, Ichigo looked away, blushing. Damn that Rukia. He stomped forward, trying to hide his blushing in the dark. Rukia on the other hand, just laughed inwardly and followed, thinking deeply. Ichigo was such a kid. She frowned. But, back then something had happened between them. After 150 years of living, she finally had her first kiss. It totally did not go as she had thought it would. First, she had thought it would be with Renji. After all, there were no other guys in which she held any sort of romantic interest in. For sure, there were guys that had a romantic interest in her, but they had quickly found out, via Renji's fist, that even though Rukia did seem like a sweet pretty Shinigami, not to mention a potential girlfriend, it wasn't worth trying to get past the Redeed that jealously guarded her. Except, now there was Ichigo, who had in a way gotten past her childhood friend. Her thoughts turned back to the moment of affection they had. Did that kiss they have even count as a real kiss? At least the place where the kiss took place was where she imagined it to be. Since Renji and her always went to that place, she had imagined that one day, he would kiss her on top of that hill. That was before she went to the real world and met Kurosaki Ichigo. The boy that changed her life. Has her feelings changed? She looked at his back, he was still stomping away. She stifled a laugh. Ichigo. What? Ichigo answered without breaking his stride, without turning around. Even though he was always like this, she realized that he always answered her, no matter what. What about Renji? Shut up. Oh crap. Someone was gonna be hurt when she woke up. And Hitsugaya had a bad feeling that it was going to be him. After he, accidentally knocked her out when she walked out of her room, what was she doing walking out of her room anyway? Toshiro carried her to her mattress and laid her down. Now, for half an hour now, he had patiently knelt by her bed and waited for her to wake. Even if he was a captain, sitting patiently, not to mention closely, to one of the prettiest Shinigami while she was sleeping was no easy feat. He would rather face a million grands than do this. And this certain vice captain was the one he had certain attachments to. There was no way in hell, or for that matter Soul Society, that he was going to say, even if it was in his mind, that he was an ARG. His face twisted due to all the thoughts whirling around in his head. Geez, even if he was nicknamed genius, this was way beyond his realm. Inamori opened her eyes. There was Shiro-chan, engrossed in some deep thought, judging by the way his face was making weird faces. This was kind of disturbing to wake up to. Why was he here anyway? This must be one of her dreams that she was so used to having. Oh no, Shiro-chan. What? The 10th Division captain looked blankly down at her. What? Hitsugaya leapt back a few feet. You were awake. His expression changed to an annoyed one. And don't call me that. Shiro-chan, what are you doing in my room? This dream seemed a bit real. But it couldn't be real. Shiro-chan would be in his quarters, sleeping at this time of the night. Yumi just came by Hitsugaya and scooted a bit closer from where he jumped back. For what? Sorry about today. Hitsugaya blushed a deep red. He placed his hand at the back of his neck. Today, what happened today? Oh yeah, they fell on top of each other and… It's okay. This was dreamlike. The real Hitsugaya would never come to her room to apologize. So this was a dream, since it felt so good. And, she reasoned, in her sleepy mind, since it was a dream, she could do stuff that she wouldn't usually. In real life that is. Anyway, she always did this in her dreams. Well, I better go now, it's getting late. He turned to go. Wait. This was weird. In all her dreams he had always been forward with her. She grabbed his sleeve. Sleep here with me. Hitsugaya turned around, blushing at her touch. Shiro-chan, it looked like she was about to cry. But what happens if tomorrow he was cut off because Hinamori had dragged him onto her futon? She frowned. Shiro-chan usually wasn't this reluctant in her dreams. Like that other dream she had last night, where he kissed her on the roof. Hitsugaya sighed inwardly. What was Hinamori thinking? At this time, he couldn't move because Hinamori's arm was draped around him. Crap, and he was still in his captain's uniform and in her futon. Actually, it was kind of warm, now that he thought about it. Maybe he could just wake up early in the morning and pretend it never happened. He closed his eyes and was about to drift off into dreamland, which he felt might be a bit weird tonight, when he felt Hinamori's arm shift slightly. Hinamori grabbed the top of his shoulder and turned Hitsugaya around until he was facing her. This was her dream and she could do anything she wanted with it. She looked into the blushing captain's face. She leant in and kissed him passionately, leaving a shocked Hitsugaya with his eyes wide open, not to mention his mouth. I'm going to sleep now. She cuddled into him and closed her eyes. He loved these dreams I've been having. If nothing can happen in real life, then at least, in my dreams, I can really love Shiro-chan. Hitsugaya just lay there, just hoping, that he could somehow get a tiny amount of sleep that night. Ah, captain's meeting. Boring as usual. Hitsugaya yawned quietly. At least everything seemed normal amongst the captains. Well, normal being the usual death threats from Zaraki to everyone in general, the annoying Weasley voice of Kuretsuchi Mayuri muttering to himself about how he was going to kick his stupid vice captain Nemu for burning his breakfast, which by the way, wasn't her fault. Then there was loud depressing sighs from Kairaku Shunsui, still dreaming about his vice captain. It was the only time he could without getting hit by her. Yuki Take looking around the room absent-mindedly, Soi Frong, who stood up straight, serious, and looking annoyed as usual. Then there was Hitsugaya looked further down the line. Kichiki Bayakuri looking as disdainful as he could in front of the 1st Division captain, Anohana, who was looking as peaceful as usual, well, as peaceful as you can be if a certain bloodthirsty 11th Division captain was growling out death threats to every other person in the room, although funnily enough, none of those threats were ever directed at her, Hitsugaya noted with a smirk. Then, of course, towering above the rest, was Sajin. Hitsugaya shivered. That wolf fox guy was weird. Not to mention scary. And tall. Hitsugaya averted his gaze. There was that orange-haired guy that was somehow so annoying. The orange-haired captain turned when he felt someone gazing at him. And met ice-cold eyes. Well, actually he looked at some spiky whitish blue hair, then realized who he was actually looking at. Ahem. The 1st Division captain cleared his throat, suspiciously louder than usual. It was hard to believe that this rowdy lot called themselves captains. Eventually the noise died down, and the captains started to pay attention. The old man sighed inwardly. Though the captains didn't know it, the reason why he had to schedule the captains' meeting so early in the morning was because they didn't settle down for about half an hour. So now the ruckus has died down. The old captain waited for complete silence, but there was something niggling in the back of his mind. He heard snickering. His eyes shifted to the source of the sound and saw the new captain, Kurosaki Ichigo, snickering like a little girl. He made his eyes flash dangerously, but the new captain just kept giggling away. Ahem. Ichigo looked up from his snickering and looked around. Oh. They had actually started the meeting. He stifled his giggling and stood up straight, trying to keep a straight face. The old man sighed. That would have to do. Though, he wondered absent-mindedly, what would make Ichigo snicker like that? Let's start the meeting. Ichigo zoned out after that. He just couldn't help but remember last night, and the old man's voice was so boring. Flashback. It was getting late. They had passed the living quarters of the first 4 divisions, and they had paused at the vice-captain's quarters of the 5th division. Boy, Rukia, why did you stop here? Ichigo grumbled as he nearly bumped into the short Shinigami. She looked at him blankly. Go check on your vice-captain, idiot. Huh? He returned her blank stare. You're a captain. Captains always check on their vice-captains before the day ends. The day ended a long time ago, Rukia. Smack. She first met his chin. Ow, 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 okay, Ichigo rubbed his chin. Now that they were in Soul Society, her punches actually hurt a bit. Geez, he grumbled. It was too late at night to argue, and even though he loved to argue with Rukia, he really wanted to sleep right now. He slid the door open a crack, then closed it. Okay, done. He straightened up. Can I go to sleep now? She kicked him in the back. Okay. I'll check. Properly. He mimicked in an annoyingly high voice. Which earned him another kick in the backside. This time he slid the door open more than just a crack. Yes, there was Hinamori, sleeping peacefully. Geez. What did Rukia expect to find anyway? Her sprawled out on the floor, bleeding. Hold on. Was it his imagination, or did Hinamori look a bit larger than usual? Like, 2 lumps of people. 2 people. Ichigo took a step inside the room. He was about to take another step when he was caught by Rukia. What the heck are you doing? She hissed. You checked already, no need perv on her. Wha? Ichigo blinked. Pervert. Shut up. No. Loser. Friken Rukia. Leave it to her to think that he was perving on his vice captain. But it was too late at night and he couldn't give me stuff anymore. Look at her bed. Doesn't it seem kinda fake to you? Huh? Rukia asked. This was weird. Ichigo did not name call her back. She looked inside the darkened room. She saw what he was wondering about. See? That's why I was checking. He rolled his eyes. Yeah. She paused, one step inside the room. Look, wait here, and I'll see what's going on. We wouldn't want people to think you were perving on your vice captain, now would we? Ichigo groaned. Only Rukia would think something as absurd as that. Why would he want to check out his vice captain anyway? For sure, he acknowledged that she was prettier than most other ladies, but he held no interest in her whatsoever. And since it was so obvious to the rest of the court of pure souls that her jealous protector was that little brat of a captain who, even though was a little brat, he was a strong little brat that most people wouldn't want to mess with. Besides, he was knocked out of his train of thought when Rukia hissed at him. He looked into the room and blinked. Rukia wasn't there. Boy. She tugged his captain's uniform from behind him. I'm here, idiot. Huh? Ichigo whirled around. Wow. Let's go. She started walking away from the room. Rukia, did you check already? Yes I did, now let's go. Rukia had suddenly started acting strangely. Tired as he was, he knew he wouldn't get any sort of response from Rukia when she acted like this. Ichigo. Just wait. Ichigo quietly stepped into the room and walked to the side of his vice captain's futon. He looked, then before he started bursting into laughter, he quickly ran outside the door, as quietly as he could, closed it, then hurried over to where Rukia was standing. Ichigo would have awakened the Holgate 13 if it wasn't for Rukia's fast hand which clamped down over his mouth. She dragged the laughing Ichigo with her other hand to a safe distance and waited for him to calm down. Finished yet? Guys were so immature at these sorts of things. Yeah, then he started rolling on the floor in laughter. Did you see the look on his face? Yeah, get over it, Ichigo. Rukia frowned at him. I thought it was sweet. Be what? Rukia continued frowning down at him. Honestly, this guy acted so mature at times, and at others, acted childish. Okay, so the most widely spoken about couple in the court of pure souls were sleeping together, in a good way that is. And this was the first time she had seen them. Okay, she would allow herself a small giggle when she got to Byakuya's mansion, but that would be it. Only for the sake of Hitsugaya Taicho's face. No need to roll herself on the ground like this idiot in front of her. I can't believe they actually sleep together. They don't. Which was the wrong thing to say, Rukia immediately told herself. Oh. Ichigo's mouth curled up into a smirk. Don't even think about it, Ichigo. What? Don't worry about me. No blackmailing. She demanded. Yeah, good night. Ichigo picked himself up off the ground and headed to his living quarters. Rukia looked at his back. That loser. He didn't even walk her home. But, she chuckled quietly to herself, that was probably because of her brother. Then flashback. Okay. That's all for today. Yamamoto's sharp old voice cut through Ichigo's thoughts. Before you all leave, please remember to confirm your vice captain's choice about going into the all-out competition for the remaining 2 vacant captain places. If there is anyone else wanting to try out, other than your respective vice captain, just tell me. I will take care of all others wanting to try out. That is all. The captains shuffled out the door. Ichigo caught Hitsugaya's eye. Then cracked up laughing again. What? Hitsugaya scowled. Ichigo looked back at the white-haired genius. Oh, funny joke. The genius looked at the orange-haired captain, then strut off, his nose in the air. Ichigo was about to follow suit, well without the nose in the air bit, when he heard the old man say something. Kurosaki Taichu. Ichigo turned around to see Yamamoto speaking to him. Yes. Because I am concerned about your well-being, please refrain from letting your vice captain try out for captaincy. Even though she may well have the skills and abilities to become a captain, the duels are, after all, life-threatening. Yamamoto looked at him. Ichigo looked back and blinked. So? I'm not taking part in it. Yamamoto smiled. Sometimes, humans could be so dense. Yes, I know that. However, if your vice captain tries out, she will have her life on the line. Ichigo looked at the other captain. Did this guy think he was dumb? Yes, I know that as well. You just told me the duels were life-threatening, right? The old man's eyebrow twitched the tiniest bit. If he graded out with much difficulty, she tries out, you may be in danger of your life. Huh? Ichigo blinked. The old man could feel some burning desire to fry this ignorant captain right here, right now. And. No pun intended, if the old man's eyebrow twitched, she dies, a certain captain may not be very happy. You may have an unwanted fight in your hands. Who is this certain captain? Ichigo asked as innocently as he could. The room exploded into flames. Ichigo leapt backwards outside the room. Okay, I get you. He left the smoldering room. Geez, old man, can't even take a joke. He muttered under his breath. Of course I knew who it was, it's not like him dumb. Meanwhile, Yamamoto sat in the meeting room, clenching and unclenching his fists. Young Fryken Hulai Gans these Fryken days. He then proceeded to mutter a collection of colorful profanities. Which was a lot, since he had been alive, well dead, but still alive, for an extremely long time. Inamori walked out of her vice captain meeting. Nothing new. She looked around, then decided to head off to her quarters to her new captain. As she was walking towards the 5th division she almost bumped into Hitsugaya. "Oh, Shiro-chan." She immediately blushed. The white-haired captain looked up at his childhood friend. "What? And don't call me Shiro-chan." He looked away to hide the slight tinge of red coming to his face. He left her room extremely early in the morning. There was no way she possibly knew about and what about last night anyway. That had been on his thoughts ever since last night really. She. Shiro-chan, can I ask you something? Yes, but only if you Shiro Fry Ken-chan. Oh, what the hell was she gonna ask? She doesn't know, she doesn't know, she doesn't know, he chanted mentally. Hinamori giggled. Okay, Hitsugaya-kun. Hitsugaya looked at her and arched an eyebrow. What? She doesn't know, but she kissed me. How could she not possibly know when she kissed me? She blushed deeper. What were you doing in my room last night? The white-haired genius promptly fainted. The old captain sat there. Nothing new, just sitting. This time, however, he was thinking about a new matter. Who were there amongst the vice captains whose skills could actually be considered captain level? The old man mused to himself. Well, there was his vice captain, but Yamamoto knew that his vice captain probably performed better as a vice captain. The next one to come up was Jin's vice captain. Kira. He could probably pass for a captain. Kira would be an okay choice. The problem was that he knew Bankai already. The old captain shrugged. Probably not. The other vice captains were pretty useless. Hinamori Momo was a formidable fighter, however putting her in the tournament would pose a very high threat to all those involved, thanks to the protectiveness of the 10th division captain. Well, she was out. Anyway, she probably couldn't handle it, with Aizen's loss and all. Next up was Hisagi. The Shinigami that had been the most popular and one of the strongest in his grade at the Shinigami Academy. He definitely was a candidate. His skills were sharp in all areas, he was brave and had excellent leadership qualities. However, Yamamoto had heard a rumor that he had been beaten by the rank of 5th officer. When the old man had first heard that, he nearly fainted. The 5th officer beating a vice captain. However, when he heard that the 5th officer was from the 11th division, understanding dawned upon him. That 11th division under Zaraki Kenpachi definitely had promise. Speaking of which, he had also heard rumors that Ikaku had achieved his Bankai. Ikaku was definitely going to be a candidate. He listed those names in his head that he needed to have a special talk to. Kira, Hisagi, and Ikaku. He sent his vice captain to get them. Shiro-chan. Hitsugaya groaned. Shiro-chan. Someone was calling him. It was a sweet voice. Shiro-chan. This time Hitsugaya opened his eyes to look full in the face of Hinamori. He nearly fainted again. He thought Hinamori was beautiful. In the past few decades he would never admit it to himself. However, after those past few decades he had done some growing up. He now would allow himself to say that she was pretty. Only to himself, of course, no one else. That would take another couple of decades. Shiro-chan, what's wrong? Her eyes gazed down on him in concern. Gazed down on him? Why was she looking down on him, like he was lying down? Hitsugaya moved slightly and felt where he was lying down. On her lap. Another near faint. Luckily, Hinamori chose that time to wave her hands in front of his face. Yuhak, okay, I'm alive. Hitsugaya sat up slowly, reluctant to leave his position on Hinamori's lap. He sat up with his back facing towards her, remembering what she had asked that had made him faint. Hinamori looked at her childhood friend. Well, his back. Shiro-chan. What? Why? And don't call me that. Were you in my room last night? Hitsugaya's genius brain was ticking faster than the speed of light. He tried to conjure up all these excuses, but all that came to his mind was the pressure of her lips upon his. Hold on. This question she asked just now was a bit different to the one before. She blushed deeper. What were you doing in my room last night? Maybe, just maybe, there was some slim chance that she didn't know. Hitsugaya put on his best disbelieving voice and turned around. Hinamori, I wasn't in your room. Looking her straight in the eye, he said, dreaming of me, maybe. That was a flirting tone. Hinamori couldn't believe her ears. Shiro-chan, flirting. It was too good to be true. Maybe she had just interpreted it wrong. Hitsugaya looked up to see Hinamori's face light up temporarily, then cloud over. Oh, she looked, almost, sad. That's what it must have been. What must have been? She returned to her usual shy self. I had a dream about you. Oh, Hitsugaya stuttered. Okay, things were definitely getting out of hand. He had to say something. What was it about? Okay, so he had to say something but not that. Well, she didn't look him in the eye. I had a dream that you came to me. She paused. You were being very sweet. She blushed furiously. It just seemed so real, so I had to ask you cause you know how dreams sometimes seem so real and, yeah, don't worry, it was just a dream. Itsugaya nodded, he didn't know what to say. But he did know that he could not tell her that it wasn't a dream, because if he did, it would make things so awkward between them. People just don't walk up to some other person and go, "Oh, guess what, you know that dream you had about me and you kissing? Yeah, well, you know, it was actually real, that was just way too random." Not like he cared about him and Hinamori kissing. No, not at all. "Anyway, I have to go now, Shiro-chan." She stood up. "Stop with the Shiro-chan." He sighed and stood up. They stood there for a moment. Hitsugaya felt relieved and ashamed at the same time. Relieved because Hinamori was just doing that stuff last night because she thought it was a dream, ashamed because he had lied to her. "Oh, wow, Shiro-chan, you really are getting taller." Her sweet voice cut through his melancholy thoughts. Huh? He looked at her. Actually, it was true, he could see her whole face without having to crane his neck. "Oh, yeah. And, you look a bit older." "I'm handsome," Hinamori giggled. "Whatever." Hitsugaya strolled off casually, pretending not to care about her compliment, even though, for some unknown reason, his heart was beating at an absurdly fast rate. He lifted one hand. "Bye. Bye, Shiro-chan." A large drop of sweat formed rather quickly on the captain's head. She would never stop calling him that. But secretly, he liked it. There was no way that he was going to tell that to anyone. As he made his way to his office, he bumped into the orange-haired Shinigami. "Watch where you're going." Kurosaki Taichu Hitsugaya was still slightly annoyed at Ichigo for laughing at him for no particular reason. Everyone else he could keep his cool. For some reason Ichigo just ignited his temper. "Now, no need to talk dirty." Ichigo smirked. Imagine what would happen if, suddenly, the whole 10th Division found out where their captain really was last night. With that, the new captain swaggered off, noting with mild surprise that it had begun to snow. Asagi, Kira, and Ikaku made their way to Yamamoto's quarters. Just as they were about to reach the undercover area, Ikaku swore. "What's the deal with this snow? My head is cold." "Well, don't shave it, then, badly." "I don't want to hear that from you, tattoo face." "Shut up. It's art, not a tattoo." "Art my ass." "Yes, your ass, on your head." Kira looked at the two of them and sighed loudly. All he really wanted to do was concentrate on his emo haircut. That definitely rocked over these two guys' hair arguments. The two of them stopped their bickering and glared at the sire. Kira looked up at them. "PFFT, don't include me in your lame arguments about hair. Mine is the best anyway." "Your hair?" Hisagi spluttered out. "Well, excuse me for not having an emo haircut like yours." Ikaku joined in. "It's not even dyed black." Just as Kira was about to release his soul slayer, Yamamoto motioned for them to come inside. "I had originally wanted to just give you guys a general conversation outside, but it seems we can't have that due to this unexpected weather." Yamamoto frowned. Probably some poor Shinigami that had tried to flirt with a 5th Division vice captain and had unfortunately got caught. He nodded sagely to himself. That must be it. The three vice captains followed the captain inside his quarters while glaring at one another. "The reason why I have called you here should be obvious. Captain's positions." It was Kira who spoke up first. "Nah, he wants us to clean the toilets." Ikaku answered in a bland voice. The vice captains returned to listening mode. "Anyway, which of you wants to become a captain?" No one moved or said anything for that matter. Even though they knew it was about the vacant positions, when asked the question they stood there, dumbstruck. "Okay, let me ask it like this. Stay here if you want to become a captain." Yamamoto watched as Kira and Ikaku started itching backwards towards the doorway. Zip. Kira and Ikaku were gone. Hisagi just stood there, wondering why the other two had left. Those two could have qualified as captains. This wasn't predicted. Oh well, the less people trying out, the easier. "So, you want to be a captain, Hisagi?" "Yes sir. Since your captain isn't here to enter you into the tournament, I shall see to it." The old man paused before saying, "You may leave." "Thank you, sir." The old man watched the vice captain's retreating form. "Let's see if you really can handle being a Gate 13 captain." As soon as he was out the door, Hisagi flash-stepped to catch up to Ikaku and Kira. "Guys, what's the deal?" Ikaku and Kira slowed down. Kira spoke up first while looking at the ground. "I don't feel like I'm strong enough for the responsibility of captain." Hisagi shrugged. That was expected. But Ikaku probably was better than every single vice captain in the whole Gate 13. And, Hisagi knew that somehow, Ikaku had gotten his Bankai. That was a sure ticket to captaincy. "Well, my only wish is to serve under that man, Zaraki Kenpachi." Though seeing the usually joking Ikaku so serious made him feel awkward. "Well, be seeing you guys around." Renji yawned. That was such a boring vice captain meeting. It was so boring that even now, half an hour later, it got to him. He scowled and kicked a rock along the footpath. He looked up to see where it went, then doubled over as the rock came flying back at him. What the foo? TSK. Shouldn't kick rocks around, Renji. Renji grimaced, then grinned. Ouch. Damn it Rukia, did you really have to kick it back that hard? Yes. Renji straightened up, then scratched the back of head. I'll never understand you, he muttered to himself. I can explain myself with the help of a few drawings. Okay, stop. Anything but her drawings. I understand you. Rukia grinned evilly. What do you have on today? She asked sincerely. Thingy was going to go visit our old place. Want to come? Sure. As they walked towards their childhood, Rukia made no mention that she actually had been there just the night before. Actually, just being there didn't really mean anything. Renji knew she visited by herself from time to time. However, if she happened to be with a captain named Kurosaki Ichigo, it would turn into an entirely different story. She laughed in spite of herself as they continued walking. Renji stopped and frowned at her. What's so funny? Nothing. Let's keep going. You. Yes, Aizen-sama. I want you to scout out that region once more. There is a girl there who I would like to assess. Certainly, Aizen-sama. Oh, and one more thing. Bring a friend. You might get hurt. Yes, Aizen-sama. This is the girl. Aizen took a picture out from beneath his robes. The Aranker looked closely at the picture. Oh. The Aranker turned from the presence of Aizen. The former Shinigami captain just sat there until a voice interrupted his thoughts. Oh my, now why would you be using the likes of him? Jin. It is not that difficult to retrieve a mere girl from the human world. She does, after all, have some amount of spirit power. Besides, if I sent stronger Arankers they would be detected by him. Whatever you say, boss. Come on Rukia. Renji looked behind him to see his childhood friend merely strolling. Oh, please, since when did we have to run to this place? I'm not running. It's called a fast walking pace. Fast walking pace my foot. Shut up. Look, we're here. They reached the peak of the hill that overlooked Rukongai. Renji stretched. I haven't been here in ages. Rukia, at his side, was silent. She had practically just been here. Her eyes glanced over to the side where she and Ichigo had that stupid picnic. What was she thinking then? Actually, she wasn't really thinking about the picnic, she was more thinking of what she had done during the picnic. They had kissed. Boy, Rukia, stop drifting off. A clear voice cut through her thoughts. Rukia realized that she was staring not at the remarkable view, but at a patch of grass beside them. That, of course, counted as weird behavior. Oh, he was just thinking about something. Renji shrugged. Rukia was still Rukia, even though at times she acted rather strangely. Even more so now, when Kurosaki Ichigo had come into contact with her, they corrected their lives. The thought of Kurosaki Ichigo temporarily darkened his thoughts. Sure, Ichigo was a good friend, but there was one vital thing that stuck in the way of their friendship. Well, not a thing, but a person. Ichiki Rukia. Before, when they used to go on these trips together, Rukia would pay him full attention and he would try to show off to her about how he was so strong, etc. Now that Ichigo had come into the picture she would usually just stare off into the distance as if remembering her times with Ichigo. When Ichigo left last time, she had become a body with no emotions, a person that couldn't quite get the kick in life. When Ichigo returned however, it was like real, flowing, life just entered that dead body. Damn Ichigo. Rukia. Yes. This time she answered. She was painfully aware that their friendship had drifted further and further apart. She knew it was partly because of her. Renji did not finish his sentence. He decided it would be too dangerous, way too dangerous. However, Rukia didn't say anything, obviously waiting for him to finish. He sighed inwardly. Do you like Ichigo? There, the question was out. Her response was quite a weird one. Rukia turned to him, looking all flustered, and a tinge of pink appeared on her cheeks. What? She paused for a moment, lost for words. What makes you say that? Damn Rukia. He knew she'd avoid questions like this. I was just curious. Curious? Rukia was spluttering. She was in an awkward position. She knew, even though most people thought she didn't, that Renji harbored feelings towards her. She didn't want to hurt her childhood friend, so her response was, well, I don't like him. Renji turned his head to look at Rukia. She was such a good liar. Liar. What? I said, liar. He had been around her too long. This long, and he knew when she was lying and when she was telling the truth. She definitely was lying. And even if he hadn't been around her for very long, he would have still called her a liar, because the way she acted when Ichigo was around was very different from the way she acted around everyone else. Even though they fought a lot, it was still obvious. You didn't need to be a rocket scientist to see the chemistry between those two. Sometimes, Renji wished that you did have to be a rocket scientist. Rukia looked at her red-haired friend. What was he getting at? She opened her mouth to retort but was cut off by a change of tone in Renji's voice. You know, we overheard a bit of your conversation with Kichiki Taichu last night. Oh. That was it. The reason why Renji was being so weird today. That darted conversation. That's why I wanted to know. Flashback. The red-haired Shinigami tossed and turned in his bed. Freaking hell, he growled to himself. For some reason he could not get to sleep. Like always, there were too many things on his mind. First off, there was Rukia. When you're about 150 years old you think that you'd get over a girl pretty quickly, right? Wrong. Renji thought about Rukia while he lay in his bed almost every single night. But tonight, something else was bothering him. He just couldn't get to bed. After tossing and turning a little longer, Renji threw the covers off his futon and stomped outside for a walk. He walked aimlessly, and soon he found himself near the residence of his captain, Kichiki Byakuya. Renji looked up at the huge mansion, then resumed his walk. Well, he tried to, and then stopped when he heard Byakuya's voice very clearly. Kichiki Taichu was awake. Why are you late? The tone was so cold. But it was so obvious that there was some affection below that dark too good for everyone tone. That could only mean one thing. He was talking to Rukia. So Rukia returned home late, did she? Renji smirked. This was typical big brother treatment. But why did she return home late? Iwasi was with Kurosaki Taichu, Nai-sama. Oh. Ichigo, eh? Well, of course, who else would she be out so late with? Is that so? That was a statement. Not a question. Renji stood still outside the mansion, waiting to hear more. There was a brief moment of silence, then he heard Byakuya continue. Why do you spend so much time with him, Rukia? Nai-sama, he is my friend. Are you sure? What? Rukia stopped speaking for a moment. Oh, of course I'm sure he's my friend. Rukia. Think carefully. Is he more than just a friend? After that, he couldn't hear the rest of the conversation. Probably because Rukia had gone to her quarters. But what he heard. Then flashback. Did you do what your brother had asked? Oh, so he had heard most of the conversation, even up to the point when her brother had asked her if she thought of Ichigo as more than a friend. Damn it. Why did Renji, of all people, have to hear that conversation between her and her brother? Yes. Her reply wasn't that clear, but Renji heard it anyway. Oh. Suddenly things seemed a bit awkward between them. Renji took a deep breath. He knew that she liked Ichigo. Even if she didn't know it herself, he knew, deep down, that she liked Ichigo. Well, what he was about to say now was useless because of that guy. Rukia. Yes. She replied, not looking at him directly. I like you, he blurted out. If Rukia had looked at this situation at a different time, she would have thought to herself that it was about damn time Renji told her. But now, with different circumstances, and Ichigo, what was she to say? Thankfully she was saved, because Renji hadn't finished. I know this won't accomplish anything because of him, but I'm just telling you this because I thought you needed to know. Renji stopped. What he seriously wanted to say was that he frickin' liked her and that he was hopelessly jealous of Ichigo. Renji. Silence. Both parties did not know what to say. Rukia had always imagined that when Renji confessed to her, she would gently take him in his arms and tell him that she felt the same way too. After all, she did like him, but now. Tell me, Renji broke her thoughts again and she was about to break his heart. Well, she already had. The answer to your brother's question. Rukia opened her mouth to say, no, of course I don't like Ichigo more than a friend. What the hell do you think I am, liking some stupid mortal? Before she could, however, Renji grabbed her by the shoulders and looked her in the eye. You don't need to lie to me, Rukia. A pause. It hurts me more. Rukia felt sorry for her friend. Basically all she could do now was tell him. But she was not telling him the answer to her brother's question. Instead what she said was, sorry. Another pause. Sorry, Renji. I can't return your feelings. Renji let go of her shoulders. He laughed harshly. Idiot, I know. He didn't say the next few words because he knew she would vehemently deny it. It's him, isn't it? Instead, he waited for another few moments to pass by. You better have feelings for Ichigo. It was a statement. Questioning her about it was useless. And you better let him know or else. But what about you? Rukia managed to get the words out. Renji laughed harshly again, although a bit softer this time. Don't worry about me, Rukia. As long as you're happy, then I'm happy. Which was a lie, though some of it was true. Of course, when Rukia was happy, he was happy, but this particular time being happy with Ichigo, he just couldn't take it, but at least he could hide it. If he treats you badly, just tell me. I'll kill him. With that, Renji turned his back on her. Sayonara. Rukia just stood there, looking at his disappearing back. She didn't know what to say. Her best friend had read her completely. And, he had used that word. Sayonara. A sad farewell with sad music playing in her head. As she watched him go, tears started to fall. She didn't want to make her best friend feel like this. "Renji!" She screamed out in an attempt to make him stop, even though she knew she couldn't do anything. The red-haired stopped momentarily. He then kept walking. He felt a slight dampness on his cheek. He looked up at the sky. It was clear. A few minutes later a messenger appeared right in front him, kneeling, with a scroll clasped in his right hand. "Abarai Renji, you are required to report to the meeting hall immediately." Renji looked down at the messenger. He took the scroll offered. The messenger looked up to see the red-haired response. He wasn't there. That must have been a serious message then. He stood up, about to leave, when he saw a raven-haired Shinigami walking slowly down the road. Ah, that was Kichiki Rukia. He remembered what he had been told. Vice Captain Renji and Kichiki Rukia have left on a trip of some sort. Find them and tell them that they need to report to the meeting hall immediately. This was great. He didn't need to look for the girl after all. Kichiki Rukia. You are required to report to the meeting hall immediately. With that the messenger disappeared. Rukia looked up and wiped the tears from her eyes. Why not a help butterfly? This must be important. Renji opened up the scroll once again, while flash stepping to get to the meeting hall faster. What he read disturbed him greatly. Do a ranker have been confirmed in the real world? Details will be provided at the emergency meeting. It seemed that they were making another movie. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the MultipleCyrosis for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.